M.Bison, one of the most iconic and recognisable villains in all of video game history. While this terrifying figure has terrorised the Street Fighter universe for decades, many have speculated that he is dead and buried in the game's storyline. This theory gained traction when in Street Fighter V we saw Ryu seemingly vaporise this monstrous villain, with further evidence being provided from Street Fighter III, the latest game in the timeline until recently, where Bison's presence was completely absent. Moving on to Street Fighter VI, the series' newest game, and one in which now features the latest chronological events in the story, this seemed to be yet another game set in the post-Bison era. Recently though, with the announcement of Season 2 for the title, our perspective surrounding the infamous dictator is now considerably different from what we thought before, as it seems he has re-emerged alive and well, ready to continue to unleash his dangerous psycho power onto the world all over again. So holding all of these thoughts, join me as we prepare to enter the world of Street Fighter and witness the rise of one of the most iconic villains in gaming history. In this historical upload, we shall delve into the dark and formidable legacy of this mysterious menace, the ruthless dictator and the leader of the Shadaloo crime syndicate. Known for his unparalleled psycho power and relentless pursuit of global domination, M.Bison has left an indelible mark on the Street Fighter universe. From his sinister ambitions to his epic battles against the world's greatest fighters, join us as we cover the secrets and the stories behind the ultimate antagonist who continues to strike fear into the hearts of warriors everywhere. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the terrifying story of M.Bison and his horrifying return. Yeah! So by now we all know about the overtold anecdote of Bison being known as Vega in Japan and simply being referred to as Dictator at international fighting game events. But what about this character's original design? The last opponent in Street Fighter II, the World Warrior's design, was inspired by a villain who features in the Riki-Oh anime and manga. As you can see from looking at these illustrations of the character known as Washizaki, there is more than just a subtle resemblance. As for who this dastardly do-badder is, who Bison will be based upon, Washizaki is a dictator who has complete control over a city that is not even marked on any map. Washizaki has grand goals of unleashing a nuclear attack on the world so that he can rule over it and rebuild it in his perfect vision. The story featured in this anime does have some parallels with Bison's in-game story, but we shall get to that later. Speaking of Bison's original concept, further design influence is said to have been taken from a character known as Kato Yasunori, the main villain from the movie Tokyo the Last Megalopolis, based on the Taito Monogatari series of literature. Apart from featuring, once again, very obvious design similarities, Kato is also a powerful sorcerer, giving him supernatural powers not too unlike some of Bison's fighting techniques, which we will highlight later. Kato is said to be a descendant of those who rebelled against the Japanese imperial court in ancient times, and has thus inherited their grudge. He enlisted in the Imperial Japanese Army under the guise of a Japanese soldier and manages to rise to the rank of First Lieutenant, giving him his military look. But once inside, he begins embarking on his goals to cripple Japan, even joining forces with Chinese and Korean anti-Japanese oppression groups to assist with his dubious intent. Throughout the last Megalopolis, Kato is very close to achieving his goals. Saying all of this, although there are very clear parallels between these characters and M.Bison, all these characters along with Bison himself all simply wear clothing that resembles the Japanese and Chinese imperial uniforms. In fact, when you look at the winged skull on his visor, representing Shadaloo, which we will talk about more soon, it does not make his hat look that different to those worn by SS officers in Nazi Germany. So everything about his design looks pretty damn villainous. As for this fighter, we all know that his appearance would be in the original incarnation of Street Fighter II as the game's last boss. However, he would also become playable alongside other Grandmasters as of Champions Edition. In combat in the game, Bison fights using a self-taught style, using the psycho power, an evil, negative or psychotic energy that he exploits. Bison can wield these deadly powers to great effect, pulling off trademark maneuvers such as the Psycho Crusher, an opponent-destroying torpedo spin. Amongst his varied arsenal of dangerous attacks, Bison can also use a psycho-powered charged hand, when even executing the simplest of punches. Bison's athleticism and cunning paired with the psychotic energy that he wields makes him a dangerous opponent indeed, and one worthy of a final challenge. But aside from his fighting techniques, who exactly is M.Bison? Let's find out. To put it as simply as I can, M.Bison is your typical traditional villain, motivated by a lust for power and his own self-serving interests, with one life goal of conquering the world. He can be considered a megalomaniac, a psychopath, a dictator, and even a terrorist. The man who is often regarded as the world's greatest martial artist will destroy anyone who stands in his way. His insane ego and out-of-control god complex makes it completely impossible for him to be able to empathise with anyone, and takes a great deal of pleasure in watching others suffer. This sadism is often reflected by his more than iconic evil smile, which he often cracks, particularly when he is displaying his twisted sense of humour. Bison's true beginnings are shrouded in mystery, with even his country of origin being an unknown. It is said though that there was a time when he was a young martial artist like any other, but with an overwhelming sense of ambition. Legend has it that M.Bison murdered his own master before giving in to complete chaos in his life. Bison's master is said to have been the only person in the world who knew how to manipulate the evil psycho power, before passing it on to his students such as Bison. In his thirst for more power, knowledge and strength, Bison would defeat many more martial artists, learning their techniques along the way, all as part of his goal to be known as the best fighter on the planet. Competing with all sorts of wrongdoers in the underworld, somehow Bison would become the leader of a syndicate known as the Shadaloo. Chronologically, the first point that M.Bison appears in the Street Fighter timeline is within the Street Fighter Alpha series, a trilogy of games set halfway between the 1987 Street Fighter title and Street Fighter 2, a midquel if you will. M.Bison appears as a secret character in the first Street Fighter Alpha game via a special input. Like all other characters, his storyline was retconned for Street Fighter Alpha 2. In Alpha 2, Bison learns of a fighter known as Ryu, who was successful in defeating his henchman Sagat. Bison then decides to search for Ryu so that he can recruit him to his criminal organisation. During his search, he even gets into a skirmish with a mysterious woman known as Rose, who wields very similar abilities to his own. These similarities come into play further within Alpha 3. During Alpha 2, Bison also meets Chun-Li, who he toys with, revealing he murdered her father, before finally finding Ryu. In a Darth Vader style fashion, Bison promises the young warrior good things if he joins him, but Ryu refuses, causing the two men to fight. Bison is successful in beating Ryu and takes him captive to begin brainwashing him with psycho power. Throughout his adventure, he also fights a man known as Charlie Nash, who is on a mission to defeat him. This eventually culminates in Charlie confronting him by a waterfall, and the two then fight with Charlie picking up the victory. After this, Charlie though is shot in the back by a helicopter, and Bison finishes him off by punching a hole through his chest. Street Fighter Alpha 3 reveals even more about M.Bison's story, including that he engineered Cammy using his own DNA as a template to form part of an elite doll squad. As covered in my Cammy retrospective video, she broke free from her brainwashing and seeked to save her fellow dolls. In some ways, much of the events of Street Fighter Alpha 3 appear to be somewhat of a retelling of what went down in Alpha 2, but then builds on them further, as Bison is once again on a journey to find Ryu. He even learns of and defeats Akuma, a warrior with a similar fighting technique to Ryu, who Bison deems his powers as less than nothing, declaring it only a matter of time before he claims Ryu's body as his own. The story of Alpha 3 changes depending on who you play as. In Ryu's story, Bison kidnaps and brainwashes Ken, pitting the two against one another with Ken under his influence. Like in Alpha 2, Bison defeats Ryu and subjects him to brainwashing. Ryu is able to escape though, due to M.Bison being begged by Sagat to let him have a rematch with Ryu. As Sagat is trying to wake him up, Sakura and Ken attack Bison, causing a distraction allowing him to escape. Ryu and Bison fight each other in an epic battle, with Bison trying to take control of Ryu's mind once more, but ultimately Ryu manages to win, temporarily incapacitating Bison, seeing him retreating to the Psycho Drive to regenerate himself. Aside from this, as mentioned with Cammy going rogue, she manages to turn the dolls against Bison. Bison manages to rise from the Psycho Drive, deciding the dolls are no longer of use to him anyway, so will dispose of them, warning Cammy that if he perishes, she and all the dolls will too, due to their psychic link, and he will simply use her body as his new vessel. Cammy though manages to use her genetic similarities to Bison to take control of the Psycho Drive herself, removing the psychic failsafe and saving them. As mentioned earlier with this game retconning some of Alpha 2, Chun-Li with Guile and Charlie realised they would have to destroy the Shadaloo base themselves. While Chun-Li and Guile escape the explosion, Charlie is left fighting Bison, sacrificing his own life to allow his friends to get away. In many ways, I guess Charlie is a lot like Kenny from South Park. While Bison's body is destroyed along with the base, his soul survives the explosion, taking control of Rose's body. Bison remains inside Rose's body until his Shadaloo scientists forge a new body for him, at which point he releases Rose from his control and she awakens back at home, with few memories of what happened. All of these crazy events essentially act as a setup for what went down in the famous Street Fighter 2, where Bison now has a new body and has established a brand new Shadaloo base at a temple in Thailand, subjugating nearby villages in the process. Bison announces a second World Warrior tournament with the purpose of luring out Ryu once more, leading to all the fights that unfold in so many people's favourite game. The ending of Street Fighter 2 has different outcomes depending on who you play as, but if you win as Bison, his ending declares that he successfully rules the world with no more opposition to get in his way. In Guile's ending, he claims defeating Bison was revenge on behalf of his friend Charlie, who Bison had killed in Cambodia, an event which we know was built on with the creation of the Alpha games. But perhaps the most interesting end to the tournament came with the release of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, where if players reach a specific set of criteria, in the final match Akuma shows up, killing M.Bison in an instant, serving as an alternative last boss in the game. Akuma mocks M.Bison for being a slave of his own power, giving Bison his fair share of comeuppance. Following this event, canon or not, Bison's soul managed to survive and was transferred to yet another replacement body, meaning his involvement in the Street Fighter story will continue. The next game chronologically in the story after Street Fighter 2 is Street Fighter 4. The story reveals that prior to even Street Fighter 2, Bison ordered the manufacturing of 26 androids by Sin, the specified weapons division of Shadaloo, which is being led by a gentleman known as Seth. Seth is an artificial intelligence designed to inhibit synthetic humanoid bodies that possess a tandem engine, and is one of many genetically engineered replacement bodies for M.Bison. Further to this, it is revealed that Bison murdered a Korean official and his family, with a daughter Juri barely surviving. Bison keeps her as a test subject, giving the already Taekwondo prodigy cybernetic enhancements. In Bison's absence, Seth makes his own attempt at world domination, beginning with the announcement of a new tournament. Juri though is aware Bison is not gone forever and begins to attempt to put Bison and Seth against one another. Bison manages to manipulate events behind the scenes and orders Balrog and Vega to capture Seth, with Seth revealing that Sin has been manipulating Shadaloo. This causes Bison to end up taking Juri's bait and returning with his soul being transported by scientists into another body. This one not as powerful as some of his previous incarnations, stating it did not matter as he would inhibit Seth's body soon. Bison takes part in Seth's tournament, destroying everyone in his path, encountering new opponents such as Sea Viper for the first time. Eventually he gets to Seth at Sin headquarters, attacking him for his autonomy and lack of servitude. Seth claims that he rebuilt Bison's fallen empire, with Bison claiming that was only because he planned for Seth to do it for him all along. Juri arrives on the scene realising her plan had failed as neither man had destroyed one another, due to Seth not putting up enough of a fight. Juri then fights Bison herself, with Bison's Street Fighter 4 ending revealing he was the victor. In Street Fighter 5, Bison comes up with another evil plan, this time to create 7 Black Moons, a powerful satellite system capable of causing havoc via electromagnetic pulse waves. The purpose of creating such terror would be to fuel Bison's psycho power to godlike levels. A problem he soon faces though is that parts of the machinery are stolen that are needed to make his plans become a reality. It turns out the thieves are Shadaloo programmers, so Bison dispatches his generals to locate them. A missing piece is found by Fang, Sagat's replacement within Shadaloo, which is used to activate a moon and decimate a city. In the remains of the city, Bison is attacked by Chun-Li, who he easily defeats due to his powers being at an all-time high, due to the panic and fear caused by his weapon in the sky. In fact, Bison would have killed her, but she is saved by Cammy. With Bison's power and influence on the planet reaching an all-time high, the Illuminati get involved to protect their own power. Using their insane secret technology, they revive the corpse of Charlie Nash, who Bison killed in the Alpha games. This is done in the hope that Charlie will assassinate Bison, which is made more possible through the Illuminati's bioengineering and mind manipulation. Bison easily dispatches of Charlie when the two men eventually meet again. Realising that Bison is now way too powerful for anyone to take on, Charlie only manages to escape due to the appearance of Necalli. Necalli is a new character made for Street Fighter 5 and is said to be the ancient consumer of powerful souls. He ends up challenging Bison as well, but even he gets overwhelmed by the dictator's insane powers, proving that he is so strong that he could even stop an ancient prophecy. After Charlie manages to escape the situation, he reunites with Guile and gathers with other fighters who oppose Bison. Here he realises the potential that he now wields thanks to the engineering. Utilising his power properly, he would be able to nullify Psycho power, but doing so against an opponent as powerful as Bison would still be tough. When all the fighters attack the Shadaloo base, Charlie fights Bison again, who is seemingly invincible by this point. Charlie is successful in absorbing a ton of psycho power, but eventually it obliterates him. Another newcomer to the story is Rashid, who prevents some of the moon's descending, weakening Bison's power. Having mastered a special training technique, Ryu shows up to stop Bison for good. In Bison's fight with Ryu, in his now weaker state, Bison is nearly killed by the white gi-wearing karate bum, and in a last-ditch effort attempt to perform his Psycho Inferno attack, Ryu counters with a Hadouken infused with dark energy, which causes Bison to laugh as he slowly fades away, consumed by the power of nothingness. Past this point in time, well at least up until what has been written so far, Bison becomes a mere spectre that haunts people, with the Illuminati becoming the main villains in the last games in the Street Fighter timeline, the Street Fighter 3 series. Although, looking back at all of this, Bison is certainly the most prolific bad guy in the whole Street Fighter timeline. But in regards to the timeline, this is just scratching the surface, and Bison would prove so important to the franchise that he would appear in countless other games and media too. One of the most loved representations of M.Bison is in the original live-action movie that was created directly off of the back of the success of Street Fighter 2. Not only is M.Bison the main villain in this movie, but his character in said film is by far the most beloved of all the portrayals. While the Street Fighter movie was a smash hit at the commercial box office, it has the reputation of being somewhat of a bad movie, featuring a clunky story and hammy acting throughout. Raul Julia, who plays Bison in the movie, delivers a performance so strong that he is one of the few saving graces of the entire experience. The plot of the film differs from that of the games in that Shadaloo is a South Asian nation where war has broken out, and the drug lord turned general M.Bison has seized power. In this movie, Bison is an English megalomaniacal kingpin, said to have been based off of William Shakespeare's Richard III character. For the performance, Raul would draw inspiration from Fidel Castro, Gaddafi, Idi Amin and Saddam Hussein amongst others, and would go on to copy Mussolini's hand gestures, Stalin's demeanour and Hitler's love for art. Julia was dedicated to his craft. Throughout filming, Julia was battling stomach cancer but took the role to play Bison as he felt it would allow him to spend more time with his children, who also happened to be massive fans of Street Fighter. His poor state of health is apparent in the movie due to his substantial weight loss, and would sadly pass away shortly after, but his contributions to the acting world will never be forgotten. In the world of live action movies, M.Bison would surface again in Street Fighter The Legend of Chun-Li, this time being depicted by Neil McDonough, being presented as a multilingual crime boss under the guise of a Bangkok-based Irish businessman. This version of Bison was abandoned in Thailand as a child by his Irish missionary parents, eventually running Shadaloo in this work too. This Bison sacrificed his pregnant wife in the bowels of a mystic cave, where he imbued his daughter Rose with the goodness of his soul, thus ridding himself of any sense of conscience. His raw physical power is seen to borderline on unearthly, and his spiritual power is equally immense. The film culminates with Chun-Li managing to kill him, successfully doing so by twisting his head around using her thighs. Very Xena In other live action media, Bison is ridiculously resurrected by Rita Repulsa, meaning there is a film where Bison takes on Ryu, Chun-Li and even bloody Tommy Oliver, the Green Power Ranger. At the same time the original live action movie was released, an anime Street Fighter 2 movie was released in Japan. In this film, M.Bison is of course the main antagonist and leads Shadaloo to take control of the world. Like in the Alpha series and Street Fighter 2, he sets out to seek Ryu for his fighting potential that has been proven against Sagat. The film climaxes with Ryu and Ken defeating him, but in the finale the film ends with them doing battle against one another once more. The Street Fighter 2 V animated series tells a familiar tale too, however Bison in this one has formed an odd pact with a statue that seems to be telepathically linked to him and provides his psycho power. This Bison also often loses control of his powers if he indulges in too much bloodlust. Now, Bison would appear in video games that were non-canon to the main Street Fighter video game story too, such as the Street Fighter the movie video games that were based on the original live-action movie. He would also appear in every single entry of the Street Fighter EX series, the series of polygonal fighters that were created by Eureka. This series too has its own chronological story, with it all occurring directly after Street Fighter 2. EX is basically the Dragon Ball GT of the Street Fighter series. Bison's place in the overall canon of these games is his annoyance at an individual known as Shadowgeist, who is hosting the EX tournaments. Bison wants to stop him to maintain control of the fighting and criminal world, so sets out on multiple occasions to put a stop to it all. A secret tougher version of Bison also appears in EX2 and 3, known as Bison 2. Super Saiyan Bison is created when he fuses two of his bodies together, and overall provides a nice little twist on what we are all used to from the character. Bison would also show up in a huge number of crossover fighting games, with the first of these appearances taking place in X-Men vs Street Fighter, where he would team with Magneto, Master of Magnet I might add, to pursue world domination together. However, if you play as Bison, his ending shows him betraying Magneto and defeating him. Hilariously, a Magneto completion shows Bison's ending from Street Fighter 2, with the 4 Grandmasters, with Bison being swapped out for Magneto. He would then go on to appear in a number of other Marvel vs Capcom games, along with all of the Capcom vs SNK games too. Bison would also show up in Street Fighter Cross Tekken, teaming with Jury. Bison's partnership with Jury is based on his suggestion that despite their intense dislike for each other, the two are working together towards a common goal involving the mysterious Pandora's box, with both of them trying to take one another out at the end of their campaign. Our favourite Dictator would also appear as a boss fighter in Street Fighter Cross Mega Man, made an appearance in Project X Zone 2, showed up in the mobile RPG Blood Brothers 2, and even Capcom Fighting Evolution, a game that in his ending shows him fighting and defeating Gil, the leader of the Illuminati from Street Fighter 3, who he never got the opportunity to get his hands on in the canon. All in all though, looking back at all of this, it is impossible to deny that M.Bison is the biggest baddie in the history of the Street Fighter franchise, serving as the final boss in multiple entries and reaching all new levels of power in Street Fighter V. M.Bison remains a favourite character for many, be it for his video game appearances or even his excellent movie portrayal by Raul Julia. M.Bison is a special character whose terrifying drive will always have him coming back to try and conquer the world once again. The wielder of the Psycho Power will always be one of the greatest villains in video game history. Yeah! I for one cannot wait for this character to debut in Street Fighter 6, even though some people complain that this title is on the pricey side. Fortunately, while this is the case, if you are yet to pick up and experience it for yourself, I can get you the game much cheaper than in stores. Simply use my Instant Gaming affiliate link and get up to 90% off of thousands of AAA games and support my work simultaneously. Happy shopping. Anyway, let's go back to talking about my favourite despot. Looking back at the many entries from Street Fighter's catalogue of games, M.Bison has been featured as the final boss and primary antagonist within plenty of these classics, imprinting his image in many gamers' minds as one of the most memorable villains in all of gaming history. Across each of these, M.Bison is never depicted as a regular human being with natural abilities, but instead wields what is known in the game as Psycho Power, an evil, negative, psychotic energy that is spiritual in nature. Bison, using his Psycho Power, can feed off of fear, anger and hatred of others, thus meaning the worse his behaviour gets, the more powerful he can potentially become. Little is known about the history of Psycho Power itself, or how Bison originally obtained his powers, but it is known to achieve mastery of it, all good and light must be purged from oneself. In Bison's appearances in the games over the years, he has used various technologies such as the Psycho Drive to enhance his powers, and even when his body has been destroyed in combat, using his Psycho powers he has been known to transfer his body into new vessels. With the early 90s explosion in popularity that Street Fighter 2 would bring for all of its characters, this would result in M.Bison gaining starring roles across multiple live-action movies, feature-length animations, television series and even comic books, with M.Bison featuring an enhanced form first showing up in Street Fighter, the movie, the arcade game. The ridiculous Mortal Kombat-like experience featuring digitised versions of the well-known cast. The game, developed by a Chicago-based company, Incredible Technologies, would feature a fighter known as Super Bison, the final boss for the game. It is said that the Super Bison concept was inspired by a scene in the 1994 movie that takes place after the final credits roll. This depicts Bison's hand rising from the rubble after his fight with Guile, setting up the sequel that we never received. While we never got a Street Fighter the Movie 2, a more powerful form of M.Bison at least made it to this strange game. Super Bison retains all of the moves as Bison which he can perform in his regular state, but is now noticeably faster and can do more damage with each of his attacks. He also gains the ability to be able to perform his special moves in mid-air, and can now use mid-air sliding kicks. Super Bison can be played as using third-party cheat devices within the game, and it is of note that all of his special moves require less charge time than normal. This version of the character that dons an all-black attire also now has an Akuma-like aura that follows him as he uses certain attacks. But this game wasn't the last time that we saw a more powerful form of M.Bison. The next time we would see M.Bison take an alternate form would be in the 3D polygonal fighting game known as Street Fighter EX2 that saw release in 1998. The EX series that was created by Akira Nishitani and his development house Eureka are not considered canon games to the mainline Street Fighter titles, making the sub-series the Dragon Ball GT of the Street Fighter universe. This does not mean though that these titles do not feature some interesting stories and characters of their own to showcase to the world, offering up perhaps Bison's most intriguing form yet. The Street Fighter EX story that takes place in an alternate timeline sees Bison take a form known as Bison 2 within Street Fighter EX2 Plus. Bison 2 exists in this game wearing an almost unholy looking white uniform and gains unlimited SC energy in this transformed state. Further to this, he gains the ability to perform new variations of his Psycho Cannon super combo and is able to charge them to twice of their normal size. How does he pull off this more powerful form, you may ask? Well, in the game, if certain conditions are met and players are able to defeat Bison in the final showdown, then while his body remains injured on the floor, one of his spare bodies that he has created descends from above surrounded by floating embers. In this moment, M.Bison manages to perform a fusion technique, fusing with himself, becoming the even more powerful and even more frightening Bison 2 as a result. In this state, the temple ruins where the original Bison fight took place transforms into nothing more than a black void where streaks of energy rise from the ground, making this fight the most intimidating in the game of all. Bison 2 is even more aggressive than the regular tyrannical dictator, and frequently uses his teleportation abilities to disorientate opponents as much as he possibly can. What may come as a surprise to many is that Bison 2 is not even Bison's final form. As in the game's sequel for the PlayStation 2, Street Fighter EX3, M.Bison would reveal his full potential within the EX canon. Just like in the previous games, if certain conditions are met and Bison is defeated in his base form, then gamers can face off against the villain in his ultimate state, known as Shin Bison. Shin Bison, like Bison 2, also usually wears a white uniform. However, he is now physically larger and his skin has developed a new purple tone. Shin Bison is said to represent M.Bison utilising every bit of strength he can muster to achieve his full potential as a warrior. This enables him to be able to move faster than ever before and recover from attacks at a frightening rate. In terms of in-game mechanics, it is as if Bison is in a permanent Excel state, and can instantaneously transition techniques such as his double knee press straight into a Psycho Crusher. Shin Bison is a dangerous opponent indeed. Further to this, he can even pull off a terrifying new meteor combo that is reminiscent of his knee press nightmare that was previously established within the Marvel vs. Capcom games. It is also of note that Shin Bison is reminiscent of the boss version of M.Bison that can be found within the arcade version of Street Fighter Alpha 3, in that he has much greater strength than normal while also gaining the final Psycho Crusher super combo. Years later, within Street Fighter V's extra battle missions, an all-white wearing version of M.Bison would be available to take on that resembled Shin Bison. This powered up version of Bison gives him a number of enhancements, including a backdash that gave him invincibility frames. He can also access his Psycho Crusher technique at any time, and his EX Psycho Blast does not cost any of his meter. Paired with a number of other extra abilities, this super aggressive fighter, known as Shadaloo Apparition Bison, is as challenging as ever. Canon to the actual Street Fighter story, at the end of Street Fighter V, Ryu masters a new technique that allows him to destroy M.Bison and seal his powers, preventing him from using his psycho powers to enter yet another new body. However, while his body is now destroyed, his consciousness itself survives in an incorporeal form. While this moment marked the end of M.Bison's role in Street Fighter V's main story, known as the Shadow Falls, what is often overlooked somewhat is that he would continue to be mentioned in Ed's story, a character who would not just become available to play as through additional seasons of DLC, but he would later become available to be played as in Street Fighter 6 as well. This fighter plays a pivotal role in M.Bison's story in the modern era, so let's dig deeper and see how Ed connects to all of this. To be able to fully understand this rich narrative, we need to take ourselves all the way back to the Street Fighter Alpha series to remind ourselves of the events that occur around the character Rose. In these games, she uses her unique set of skills and abilities known as Soul Power to try and rid the world of evil energy. Using her mystical fortune-telling abilities, she learns of the evil surrounding M.Bison, so sets out to eradicate it herself. The second Alpha game retcons the events of the first, but with both of them suggesting that Rose was successful in using her soul power to defeat M.Bison. But upon consulting her tarot cards, she learns he is still alive. This leads to a rematch in Alpha 3, which sees Rose transform her fist into a ball of energy and punch straight through Bison's heart. Rather than defeating him, instead this allowed Bison the opportunity to transfer some of his soul and consciousness into Rose, gaining some control over her within. Fast forwarding all the way to Street Fighter 4, if players are able to beat the game as Rose, in her ending a scene plays out whereby M.Bison ambushes her, grabbing her by the face and absorbing his soul and consciousness back into his body. This awakens memories of things he did while in her body, including seeing visions of terrible acts he committed. Amongst this imagery are visions of a boy with a bandage around his head, who would grow up to be the focus of this video. We would later learn that this young boy, known as Ed, who was kidnapped by Shadaloo, would function as one of M.Bison's spare bodies, with the potential of becoming a future vessel for him. Prior to M.Bison's Street Fighter 4 return, Ed was stolen by Seth and kept within the Sin laboratory, which provides us with the perfect explanation as to why his stage looks like how it does in Street Fighter 6. Fortunately, the Street Fighter 4 games would allow us to learn what would happen next with the boy. Balrog, while searching for treasure and things of value around the lab, stumbles across Ed. Ed begs Balrog to help him, but appears completely disinterested in him at first. This all changes though the moment he spots the glowing Shadaloo insignia on the boy's hand. So believing the child is of value to him, Balrog rescues Ed from the crumbling lab. As they walk away from the building's remains, Balrog questions Ed about what he is capable of, stating that if he's supposed to be a replacement body for Bison, he must be able to do something, such as fly or see into the future. The boy says he cannot do anything by himself, which results in the heartless Balrog telling the boy he is even more worthless than he thought. Balrog insists that since he saved the kid now has to do something for him. The scene ends with the Shadaloo symbol on the boy's hand glowing. We would get to learn more about this youngster in Street Fighter V, a title that directly follows the events of the previous game. In Street Fighter V, Bison's new enforcer, replacing Sagat, known as Fang, is impressed that Balrog managed to find the boy from Sin Laboratory, but informs him that now Operation Change is underway, that his actions can be seen as a betrayal, as he took the boy without orders being issued first. The two end up getting into a fight with Balrog winning. Afterwards, the boy comes out, revealing to the player for the first time that his name is Ed. In between the events of Street Fighter 4 and 5, it appears that Balrog raised Ed, taking on a sort of paternal role for the boy, who was created as another backup body for M.Bison. Ed has grown into a cocky and flash young man. In A Shadow Falls, the big Street Fighter V story angle, Ed helps Balrog take a control key from Zangief that helps control Bison's super weapon, but it is later restolen back from them. After Bison is defeated by Ryu at the end of Shadow Falls, Ed and Balrog are seen walking away together. Fortunately, this would not be the last that we would learn about this promising character during Street Fighter V, as a fully grown up Ed would appear as a DLC fighter for the game. In his prologue, named The Nimble Boxer, it highlights Ed and Balrog's relationship further. Essentially, after Bison's defeat, the two took refuge under a waterfall in New Zealand, but Ed was not as safe as he thought. Being an intended replacement body for M.Bison, the spirit of Bison tries to possess Ed's body, but fortunately he is successful in preventing this during his sleep and is woken up by Balrog. Ed informs Balrog that he no longer wants to stay with him, in fear of Balrog eventually getting hurt. Information he has received through a prophecy from Menat, Balrog tells him to just shut up and follow his orders, leading to an emotional fight breaking out between the two of them. Ed manages to defeat Balrog in this encounter, leading to the heavyweight boxer's most uncharacteristic moment in the Street Fighter series yet. Ed's departure not only results in Balrog expressing sadness of being left by the boy he raised like a son, but his anger and aggression is replaced with him emotionally shouting out to Ed to get lost, illustrating the game as maybe there has always been more layers to Balrog than a man who was simply just existing to make as much money as possible. As time progresses, Ed grows into a strong, muscular adult, the very depiction of him who is playable. Due to the experiments that were undertaken upon him as a child, these gave him incredible psycho powers. He also has a unique fighting style that combines boxing techniques that he learned from Balrog with psycho powers like that of M.Bison. This lethal combination makes him a formidable opponent. Speaking of combat, this short blonde-haired, piercing blue-eyed individual has moves that are much cleaner than those used by the dubious man who raised him. In the game, V-skill-wise, he can pull off a maneuver known as the Psycho Snatcher, which involves pulling opponents towards himself before attacking, and his V-trigger known as the Psycho Cannon involves forming a ball of deadly psycho energy which slowly advances towards his support opponents. Variants of these have of course morphed into his modern super arts. As a critical art, he can also pull off what is known as the Psycho Barrage, which sees him unleash a mad flurry of psycho energy fueled punches which culminate in the use of a single uppercut. Techniques like this illustrate his strong links to both Balrog and M.Bison further. Beyond his unconventional moveset, perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of Ed is the blue uniform he fights in, which upon closer inspection is once again an amalgamation of the fashion choices of Bison and Balrog. As although this costume looks very dictatory, the colour along with the lack of sleeves pays homage to the man who raised him. His second costume features a red military jacket resembling Bison to cover both his shoulders and a corresponding hat on his head. Like Balrog, he wears red boxing gloves with this look. Perhaps the most intriguing part of this look though is the suggestion that Ed, with his psycho powers, precedes M.Bison as the leader of the Shadaloo Empire, which according to Street Fighter V lore, he very well does. The key difference though is under his watch, he refers to his organisation as Neo Shadaloo, and instead of functioning as a crime syndicate, this new Shadaloo are instead a force for good. A preposterous proposition really, as dumb as if a group of people post World War II decided to label themselves as neo-Nazis. Not the best image, but I digress. The new incarnation of Shadaloo's goals are to reach out and find all the victims of Shadaloo's experiments from the past, with Ed recruiting new members along the way. These include the likes of Volk, a girl he rescued during the events of the Shadow Falls, who was also intended to be one of M.Bison's replacement bodies. Non-binary Bison was ahead of his time. Considering her like a sister, after joining the ludicrously named Neo Shadaloo, the pair spar regularly and get stronger together, with this initial pairing coming up with the idea to seek out and help other victims. We don't know a great deal about Neo Shadaloo as of yet, but what we do know is that Ed is capable of ejecting psycho power, Volk can inject psycho power into objects, and a further third, as of yet unnamed member of the group has the ability to teleport. On top of this, they are joined by an anthropomorphic gorilla named Baba, who has glowing blue eyes and glowing marks too, suggesting that the original Shadaloo experimented on animals as well as people. This ape is said to be highly intelligent and has inherited all of M.Bison's wisdom. Past this point, canonically in the timeline, it brings us around to Street Fighter VI, to an era where it seems as if Shadaloo may very well still exist. But before Ed was injected into the Street Fighter VI story, another key character would be introduced, whom links directly to M.Bison and Shadaloo. Someone whom, with M.Bison's return being confirmed to be imminent, is likely to have a run-in with the tyrannical dictator soon. So let's discuss yet another shadowy figure and his links to the dastardly dictator. Back in June of 2022, the internet broke into a frenzy thanks to leaked images which would expose the entire roster of the upcoming Street Fighter VI game. Not only were most people's all-time favourites back from Street Fighter 2, but pictures and names would also show off completely brand new characters amongst this selection of challengers. Out of all of these, one would stand out to fans as almost unmistakably Street Fighter 6's main villain. The design of this character, simply labelled as JP, just oozed final boss energy, way before anyone had ever even seen him in combat. Pictured in a dapper pink waist jacket, with a cane seemingly to beat people with, and a face reminiscent of Lord Saruman from Lord of the Rings, JP was clearly an imposing figure who would be sure to make an impact on the brand. Using the limited information we could identify about this character, fans would instantly consider what the simple initials of JP actually meant. Looking at this character's apparent age and how he dressed and looked to be carrying himself, people would speculate he was named after JP Morgan, which now, knowing even more about this character, certainly seems could be true. So circling back around to Street Fighter's JP, the Capcom official website describes the character as the head of an international non-government organisation responsible for many investment projects, a description that you could attach to either this JP or JP Morgan interchangeably. Witnessing JP in combat and his trailer footage reveals even more details about this character and his dubious and selfish intentions. In battle, JP shows immense cruelty and sadism, but what is most striking about this fighter is his two-faced nature. While appearing well dressed and polite on the surface, JP fights holding one hand behind his back. The hidden hand of JP glows with psycho power, the same energy carried by the evil M.Bison. The key difference between JP and Bison though is at least Bison was upfront about his dark desires. JP on the other hand hides his true intentions, dismissing concerns from others whenever they are addressed. Known as the regal businessman, JP fights primarily with a combination of kicks and cane strikes, but can take advantage of his hidden hand to summon portals, spikes and spectres to do his bidding on his behalf. JP's combat style, like JP himself, completely revolves around controlling his surroundings. By doing so, he can keep people away from him and attack them safely from a comfortable distance. Perhaps his most terrifying move is known as the Interdiction, an attack which sees him warp in front of an opponent and destroy them with a psycho power infused choke that detonates with his cane. JP, full name Johan Petrovich, in my opinion really is a frightening villain and a highly realistic one at that. What makes him even more scary is that people like JP and non-government organisations tend to behave in exactly the same way in real life as they do in the Street Fighter universe. JP, for example, builds power and influence under the guise of investments that are good for humanity through a group known as the Terra Network Partners, an entity that upon further inspection are no different to that of the World Economic Forum. From all of this you can see why conceptually JP is a particularly terrifying villain, but what would be his exact place in Street Fighter lore? From what we know for sure is that JP previously held the position of head financial manager in Shadaloo before its collapse. Following the organisation's downfall, JP adopted various aliases, including a Russian identity as Johan Petrovich and a French identity as Jean Philips, consistently utilising the JP acronym. He has since transitioned between multiple organisations, engaging in infrastructure projects with various countries, all the while causing disorder and chaos. In the weeks leading up to the Street Fighter 6 game's release, a promotional comic book series was launched, with these comics featuring Ken Masters as one of their focal points. Chapter 1, known as Days of Eclipse, revolves around concerns within the Masters Foundation about how Ken is spending his family fortune. Ken has invested an astounding $1.5 billion to build up an isolated small nation called Neishao, without consulting his father. His ventures include shaky business moves in cryptocurrencies, insurance schemes and communication infrastructure, all aimed at safeguarding Neishao from being absorbed by surrounding countries. The board of directors at the Masters Foundation is perplexed by Ken's decision making, especially the fact that Neishao is hosting a fighting tournament at Natured Arena as one of its support projects. The comic reintroduces Mel Masters, who is experiencing a strained relationship with his father, feeling that Ken doesn't care about his needs. Luke, who initially debuted as a military lad in Street Fighter V, now works for a PMC and serves as Mel Masters' escort. During a visit to the arena, Ken meets JP, who is working with Ken to integrate Naishao's ancient traditions with modern technology. It is revealed that Naishao has a king named Shari, who invites Ken to compete in the tournament, but Ken insists he no longer fights. The king, however, insists. Ken leaves in a car with a Masters Foundation board member, Jackson, and a driver, Marvin, attempting to avoid protesters. They encounter protesters, and among them are people wearing cloaks and masks. Gunshots are fired at the car, causing it to explode. Ken is the only one injured, and a woman and a man named Tachimoto pick him up and drive off. In Chapter 2, Ken wakes up in Tachimoto's apartment, recovering from a gunshot wound. Chun-Li informs him about the deaths of those he was travelling with, and the video framing him as a terrorist. Chun-Li insists that Interpol is taking him into custody, but Chun-Li assures him they are working to prove his innocence. During Chun-Li's absence, Ken asks Tachimoto to tend his gunshot wound, but instead knocks Tachimoto out, and Ken escapes. In Chapter 3, as a fugitive on the run, Luke spots Ken and decides to apprehend him, seeking refuge in an abandoned building. Ken encounters JP, who ominously informs him that his story was always supposed to end here. JP reveals that he framed Ken with a deepfake video portraying him as a terrorist. Ken attempts to fight JP, but he dodges Ken's moves and reveals that he has Mel captive. JP gives Ken an ultimatum. If Ken pushes a button, he will save Mel, but another drone will explode elsewhere, potentially killing others. Ken realises JP's seriousness and with a stroke of luck uses the device to save Mel. However, Luke witnesses Ken using the device, reinforcing his belief that Ken is indeed a terrorist. In a gripping moment, JP delivers a speech highlighting the fiction of worshipping nationalism, wealth, and human bonds throughout history. He contends that these are competing fictions, emphasising that even love and goodness are merely fictions that either save or kill people. JP leaves after expressing his belief that individuals justify their own fictions, leaving Ken to ponder his choices. In Chapter 4, JP, already at Mount Vashel, discusses the tournament with an officer. He learns that Mel Masters has escaped, disappointing him as he had reserved a VIP seat. At the arena, JP addresses the audience, invoking Naishao's legendary history and ancient traditions. He declares the tournament open, announcing an exhibition match. Ken confronts JP and Luke attempts to intervene. JP mocks Ken, expressing disappointment and threatening to take care of his son, provoking Ken's anger. As tension rises, Kalima, JP's secretary, blaming him for the chaos, tries to assassinate him with a dagger. However, JP disarms her and stabs the woman. JP reveals his sinister plan involving a fallen champion turned terrorist against a young peacekeeping agent. He congratulates Kalima, asserting that Naishao's existence is secured through online betting revenues. JP cynically states that history, tradition, culture, and sacred ceremonies are commodities for sale until the world grows weary of them. He warns Kalima that quitting will spell the end of everything. The chapter ends on a chilling note, leaving readers in suspense about the unfolding chaos and the characters' fates. This then sets up the events of Street Fighter 6 itself, with us being able to learn more about the mysterious JP within. When choosing to play as JP in arcade mode, in a private reflection, JP discloses that the tournament in Naishao serves as a cover for his money laundering scheme. However, he notes issues in that it has attracted numerous individuals seeking to exploit him for various purposes. His attention is drawn to a Street Fighter newcomer, Kimberly, who he detects spying on him in the arena. With a teleportation, he confronts her, questioning her presence and delivering a veiled threat. Kimberly inquires about what happened to her uncle, leading to a confrontation between her and the global elitist. After Kimberly departs, JP returns to his throne, drawing parallels between his tournament hosting and M.Bison's actions. Despite acknowledging the irrationality of using tournaments for world domination, he admits an inexplicable appeal to the idea. In typical villain and final boss fashion, such a realization triggers a fit of maniacal laughter. In Cammy's arcade story, JP emerges as her adversary as she investigates potential remnants of Shadaloo. Following the trail, she confronts JP and senses the unmistakable aura of psycho power emanating from him. In an attempt to extract information about psycho power, Cammy engages in a fierce battle with him. Despite her efforts, JP manages to escape without divulging any information, leaving Cammy with more questions than answers. In Ken's arcade story, his feud with JP continues where the comics left off. Reflecting on the predicament orchestrated by the villain, Ken is in deep thought when JP seemingly materialises, taunting him and urging him towards a path of violence. However, it becomes apparent that these are dark thoughts within Ken's mind, which he combats through a virtual confrontation with JP in the game. After JP vanishes, Ken grapples with the internal dilemma of whether to pursue a course of action that involves attempting to eliminate JP for good. Further from all of this, JP crosses paths with the Avatar in World Tour mode, serving as the mastermind behind the tournament that sets the narrative in motion. During their initial encounter, JP learns about a resistance plot to plant a bomb on the championship belt. Rather than thwarting the plan, JP exacerbates the situation by attempting to use the bomb to eliminate everyone present, including the Avatar and other characters. Subsequently, JP shares crucial information about M.Bison with the Avatar, all the while imparting psycho power to them. So, as far as we can tell from all of this, the shadowy JP, like M.Bison himself, is a psycho power user who is essentially Shadowloo's accountant. However, from Cammy's interactions with him, he has been tight-lipped regarding the organisation's future. As we know though, JP would not be the only psycho power user in Street Fighter 6, as Ed would soon join the Street Fighter 6 fray. First seen in action in his official teaser trailer, whereby we would witness this tall German punishing his chain-wearing victims on a train, this crazy scene sees him beating down individuals who are wearing boxes over their heads, which have been emblazoned with special badges showing the Shadowloo insignia, the symbol of the organisation once controlled by M.Bison. In this display of strength, like M.Bison before him, Ed utilises his terrifying psycho power, the same dark force that only flows through a few. It is worth noting though that the trailer does conclude with Ed shouting out that he's not going to be anyone's pawn, highlighting that in Street Fighter 6 he could end up becoming somewhat of a grey character. A couple of weeks later we would get to see Ed once more via his gameplay trailer, which this time began with him berating the character Avatar, threatening to punch a hole through him and telling him to stop pissing him off. As he goes to punch them in the head, it quickly reveals that he was actually talking to another one of those idiots with boxes on their heads. As his gameplay was shown for the first time, the trailer shows Ed fighting in the remnants of Shadowloo's laboratory, as bizarre German language gangster rap plays in the background. Seth-style M.Bison replacement bodies loom in tubes in the background as Ed unleashes flurries of attacks, which include seeing him laughing maniacally and hanging up Ken Masters using psycho energy as a punch bag. Cross-referencing this all with the latest information of the character on the PlayStation blog, it reminds us that Ed is the troubled protege and a bad boy of boxing with psycho power imbued within. Ed beats down his enemies with a flurry of fists to prove that he's the true high-def picture of strength. In the present day Street Fighter 6, he senses movement in the shadows from the remnants of Shadowloo. Ed soon discovers they have a twisted goal and need his unique abilities to achieve it. With regards to his latest design, Street Fighter 6 game director Takayuki comments that Ed is a high-speed boxer. We designed his lower half so that you can clearly see his nimble footwork, and added some volume to his upper body to make his punches look impactful. We also hope you take notice of the emblem on his chest and the design on his back. His attack animations have also changed significantly from Street Fighter V. To represent his background as a traditional boxer, all his attacks are now punches, except for his level 2 super art. His kick buttons have been designated to various flicker attacks. Capcom have also mentioned that with Street Fighter 6's new modern control scheme, they decided to keep his simplified inputs and incorporated them into his modern controls, while creating expanded inputs for his classic controls. Ed now has quarter circle and dragon punch inputs for his special moves in classic. The PlayStation blog adds, Ed is still the psycho-powered boxer you know and love, imbuing his fists with chaotic force and master boxing techniques. Scouring the lands to help other ill-fated experiments has significantly upgraded Ed's usage of psycho power. Psycho Blitz gives Ed another 1-2-3, but in a single special move. Ed unleashes a series of punches cloaked in psycho power. The new and improved Psycho Flicker is vital in Ed's ability to control space. Performed on its own, Ed releases a quick flicker jab from a distance in 1 or 3 directions to catch the opponent off guard. If you hold this button down, Ed will use his Psycho Snatcher from Street Fighter V to pull in opponents with psycho powered tendrils. He also has a further new special known as the Kill Rush, and can unleash the Kill Switch Chaser, a powerful uppercut which is said to be easy to combo. The Psycho Storm functions as his level 1 super art, the Psycho Cannon his level 2, and of course his striking looking level 3, the Psycho Chamber, the move we referenced earlier that sees him use opponents as a punch bag. We would get to learn more about Ed and his links to M.Bison through the game's arcade and world tour mode. Years after Neo Shadaloo was formed, Ed's location remains unknown. According to intelligence gathered by Aki, JP, the leader of Amnesia, has plans for Ed. Some of the remaining Shadaloo agents worldwide believe Ed would be an ideal leader for a revived Shadaloo, while others think JP is better suited for the role. In Ed's journey in arcade mode, it starts with him recounting the formation of Neo Shadaloo after the events of Street Fighter V: Shadow Falls. He disperses the group to find other Shadaloo hidden bases and potential victims, which leads him to Metro City and eventually to Neishao. There he encounters JP, who provokes Ed by mentioning how some Shadaloo followers named his group Neo Shadaloo and view Ed as Bison's heir. This results in a confrontation where Ed defeats JP but gains no new information from him. Returning to Metro City, a determined Ed declares his intention to engage in the impending group conflicts, asserting they will play by his rules. In World Tour mode, at the Metro City train station, the Avatar meets Ed, who is busy battling Shadaloo remnants disguised in cardboard boxes. After defeating them, Ed takes a break to check his phone and finds some news that angers him. Despite this, the Avatar bonds with Ed, who shares more about his past. Ed is troubled by the fact that the Shadaloo remnants have recruited a member of the former Metro City criminal gang Mad Gear into their cause. You know, the villainous group from the original Final Fight game. He mentions that he and Balrog are still on good terms, with Balrog frequently spending time with Neo Shadaloo during his free time. However, Ed is currently concerned about Falk's disappearance. Her last known location was Neishao, where she was conducting an investigation. When we take the escalating tensions between Ed and JP into account, one thing is clear. Tension is continuing to go through the roof between them as JP grows hungry for more influence in the power vacuum left by M.Bison. However, while this is the case, it seems the entire situation is about to be turned on its head due to the re-emergence of whom seems to potentially be M.Bison himself. Making an unexpected appearance in summer of 2024, a man calling himself M.Bison has shown up alive and well. The trailer showcases a shadowy hooded dark figure riding a black horse galloping onto the scene with his arms crossed the whole time. Rearing up and intimidating the player avatar, they drop their smartphone, which they were using to try and snap a shot of the mystery man. A gruff voice asks, "Do I resemble this man you call Bison? I shall take the name for myself." The YouTube video description attached to the trailer states that, from riches to rags, the amnesiac dictator rides across the land on his stallion, searching for an identity to make him smile. Building on the information we have at our disposal, the Street Fighter official website tells us in M.Bison's character description that he is a man who resembles M.Bison, the leader of Shadaloo, who was believed to be dead. He has lost his memories but has violent tendencies. He appears in locations related to Shadaloo, guided by psycho power. The intentional vagueness around this character has led many people to speculate whether M.Bison's soul is really inside this body, or whether that perhaps he is just a clone. One extra point that is worth noting though is that whomever you believe this man is, official Capcom source material outlines that he is suffering from amnesia, a rather poignant condition indeed when we take into account that the dastardly JP's organisation is also known as Amnesia, making it almost certain that he is something to do with this mystery man. This latest incarnation of the man who calls himself M.Bison has long white hair and a distinctive new look. He no longer wears the top part of his traditional uniform, instead draping his shoulders and head with a dark blue fabric, likely repurposed from his former cape. His eyes emit the eerie glow of psycho power. Bison now sports white facial stubble, and possibly due to his last battle with Ryu in Street Fighter V, bears a prominent scar on the right side of his face and arm. This scar is illuminated by the teal glow of psycho power he is striving to control, and it's particularly visible during his taunts and victory poses. Despite his amnesia, the unmistakable menace of M.Bison is evident in his demeanour and combat style in Street Fighter VI. his signature moves return with a vengeance, showcasing the terrifying power he wields. Bison retains his brutal double knee press, known as the scissor kick, and the devastating Psycho Crusher. The Psycho Crusher's normal version now absorbs a projectile hit while still maintaining its damage in hitbox, allowing Bison to plow through attacks. The Overdrive Psycho Crusher elevates this by phasing through projectiles entirely, making him even more formidable. Additionally, Bison retains a variation of the Psycho Charge from Street Fighter V, which plants a bomb on his adversaries. Purple energy crackles ominously from Bison's form, but this time he also channels a sinister green glow in certain moments and a new dimension to his deadly aura. His overdrive knee press has been enhanced to launch enemies into the air, enabling Bison to juggle them for extra damage. He also brings back the head press and Devil's Reverse, making him a nightmare to counter in the air. The unpredictability of his aerial maneuvers keeps opponents on edge, never knowing what to expect. The overdrive head press initiates a cinematic sequence upon landing and can be used as an off-ground move, extending combos for increased damage. M.Bison's return is a blend of familiar brutality and new terrifying abilities, solidifying his status as an intimidating and dangerous force in the Street Fighter universe. Appearing more psychotic, more dishevelled and more unhinged than ever before, the future for this dastardly dictator is more intriguing than ever, and I for one cannot wait to see what unfolds for him in Street Fighter's rich story as of next. Don't forget you can get Street Fighter 6 and up to 90% off of thousands of other AAA games simply by using my link via the pinned comment. It supports mega projects like this and gets you bargains simultaneously. It's a win-win for all of us all around. Also, if you want more content like this, click my equally detailed video on the terrifying story of Akuma right now. Cheerio.